So what actually makes up food? Let's, say we've been talking about it's made of matter because it's physical stuff, and it contains lots of chemical potential energy, and that's one of the primary reasons that we eat food. But let's get a little less theoretical and a little more practical with this. So there are three major constituents that make up the majority of our food, at least, other than water, and that is carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. These are what are termed macromolecules. These are big, important biological polymers. There's a fourth group, the nucleic acids, the stuff that makes up our genes. We don't tend to talk about this in nutrition context because they don't really get used much for energy. And while we absolutely need them to make more cells and repair things that get damaged, every living thing has some small amount of nucleic acids in it. And since the stuff that we eat for food is stuff that was previously living, you don't really get deficient in nucleic acids. So, carbohydrates, proteins, lipids. These are the ones that we tend to talk about. On the right, we've got a nutrition label for some Trader Joe's pita chips, to kind of connect what I'm saying here to a bit more of an everyday thing for you. So, carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are one of the main things that we talk about. And note here that this has actually been divided up: total carbohydrates, dietary fiber, and sugars. This is because the amount of fiber you consume in your diet and the amount of sugar that you consume in your diet is associated with health outcomes for good and ill. So on nutrition labels, these tend to get busted out a little bit. So dietary fiber, this is the stuff that you eat, but you are not able to break down for energy. So an example of this might be cellulose, essentially, the woody fibrous parts of plants. Now, we're not going around chewing on pine, like pine boards, because while that is mostly made of sugar, it's a form that we aren't able to break down. If we aren't able to break it down, why does it matter? Well, with digestion, with your digestive tract, actually having this stuff that is sweeping through but isn't getting broken down really helps your digestive tract work better. So, dietary fiber helps your digestive tract work better and is associated with a lower cancer risk, hence why we care about it. Why are sugars called out? Well, sugars, in addition to being delicious, also too much sugar consumption is associated with negative health outcomes. So the adage, the sugars, the simple sugars, get called out. And okay, we've got 2 grams of fiber, 5 grams of sugar. Where's the other 11 grams of carbohydrates coming from? That's coming from things that are not just simple sugar, but are more complex carbohydrates, things like starch, which we are able to break down for energy. And that really is the primary purpose of carbohydrates in our body. They're the energy molecule. In the next lecture, this is going to get talked about more, what the functions of these various things are, but I'm going to kind of call out the biggest thing for each of them. Protein. So proteins are the things in your cell that do stuff, the enzymes, and they also make up a lot of the structures of our cells. And so you need to have a certain amount of protein so that you are able to make the stuff that you need, build the stuff that makes up your cells. And that's why protein gets called out on your nutrition label. And note, too little protein, you're not going to be able to make stuff that you need. You're going to really start suffering. Too much protein can also be a bad thing. Protein isn't something that we tend to break down as easily for energy, and there are some kind of nasty byproducts that get made when we're breaking down protein. So, if you have more protein than you need, more protein than you're going to use to build proteins in your body, it really just stresses out your kidneys and doesn't help you out. Lipids. Lipids are fats, cholesterols, or fats and cholesterol. That's the big ones nutritionally speaking. There's also phospholipids, waxes. Essentially, they're the greasy stuff. These tend to get a really bad rap. And a lot of people are worried about total fat, or also here, calories from fat. But we need fats in order to function. They're actually a major component of our cells. And so while it's not good to get too much fat, and it's not good certainly to get too much saturated fat, and certainly not trans fat, you need to have some of that, or your cells are going to stop functioning. So energy. The energy here is in your calories. And remember, capital C calories are equal to kilo low c calories. So the capitalization really does matter. What form is the energy taking? It's not lightning in your pita chips. It is those carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids. The energy, the chemical potential energy in your food is stored in these macromolecules. And our nutrition labels also are calling out the vitamins and the minerals, the stuff that we need in order to function. So here we've got our sodium and our iron. It's the stuff that we need in order to function. And it includes minerals as well as vitamins. Vitamins is a term that is short for vital amines. So these are nitrogen containing compounds that are essential for life to continue functioning. This is stuff like your B vitamins, vitamin C, vitamin E, riboflavin, all of that jazz. You don't need a lot of them, but you do need enough of them, hence why they get called out on the nutrition labels. We're not going to talk a lot about vitamins and minerals in this segment, in part because it's a really huge topic and there's a lot of rabbit holes you can disappear down. So we'll talk about it a little bit when we're talking about more details of food components, but just note, we're really not going to be covering the whole thing. And you really are what you eat. So to, again, try and connect these things, these nutrition labels, to real life a little bit. So on the left, we've got the human body composition by percentage. And on the right, we've got nutrition facts for a human body. So if we took a human being and we broke them down into 100-gram portions, what will we get? What would make this up? Well, one thing to note, biggest single component is water. We are mostly made of water, so do be drinking your water. Make sure that you're getting your hydration. This is important for everyone. The biggest single component that we have here is protein. Let me just quick remind myself of the colors I was using on the previous slide. So biggest single component is protein. A lot of us is made out of protein, hence the need for us to consume protein in order to grow and in order to stay healthy. But note, these proteins are there. They're not turning over constantly. We don't need to always be replacing all of it. So you only need a certain amount of protein to keep up with making sure that this is in good repair. Fat, those lipids, that's our next big component, 10% of our body. 10% of our body. That's a lot of it cell membranes. And there's also things like the fat that protects your nerve cells and helps them function correctly. Most of that fat is saturated. No trans fat. We are not a processed food stuff, so you really don't find appreciable amounts of trans fat in us. But we're not all saturated. There's some unsaturated fat in there as well. And that's really important to keep everything functioning correctly, that you have the right balance. Carbohydrates? Carbohydrates are not that much of us. 1%. And if we look over here, no dietary fiber, because we are not plants. It's almost entirely sugar. But we have to eat so much of it in sort of a standard balanced diet. What's going on with that? Carbohydrates, again, they get broken down to harness the energy inside of them, not used to build us up because we don't have plants, like plant cell walls. We don't need to make cellulose. And so the carbohydrates don't really stick around in that particular form much. They're mostly there and get used relatively rapidly for energy. And then minerals. Minerals, 5% of our body is minerals. I'm sure some of you are thinking like, but she said that we don't need, it's trace, it's little amounts, it's what's going on there. Note, calcium and iron, huge components of those minerals. Where do you find calcium in the human body? Where do you find iron in the human body? So calcium, that's your bones. Those get built, but those aren't getting turned over at a huge rate. Iron is found in your hemoglobin, in your blood. And so that red blood cell lasts for 3 months. And some of that iron, when that red blood cell gets broken down at the end of its lifespan, can get scavenged and used again. So you do need to keep consuming those things, but not at crazy high rates, even though they are literally 5% of your body. And we've also got some sodium going on in here. Sodium is really important for healthy nerve cell function. It's just that we don't need nearly as much of it as tends to get consumed in a standard Western diet. So that's why we're worried about limiting it rather than making sure that we get enough. If you want to dig more into this, I think this is really cool, but this is sort of giving you a overall big picture of what's going on, how this stuff connects. Next, we're going to talk about these different components, break them down, do a little bit of a deeper dive on that.